Alright, so let's try this again. Hopefully we'll have a little bit better luck, and unfortunately I'm having to record directly off of the screen rather than doing a screen recording. So this is an introduction of how to go about doing a spreadsheet using the Google Sheets. So first thing make sure you want to do is log into your school account and go to your Google Apps, and you want to select Sheets. And up here towards the top, you'll have the various options here, but what I want you to do is click on blank, and it will open it up to something like this. I'm going to move the camera just a little bit. So I'm taking the approach as though you may not have ever done this before. So let me go over a few things with you. First of all, you have columns. You have columns A, B, C, D, and it goes all the way to double letters. And then you also have rows. It goes 1 down to the thousands here. If you scroll down far enough, it goes down pretty far. So each row is identified by its number, each column is identified by its letter, and then each box is represented by each box is called a cell, and it's identified by both its column and row. So for example, this is cell A1, this one here is cell B1, this is cell A2, and then this one would be B2, etc. for all the other ones here. So it's kind of like if you ever played the game Battleship, you have the letters and the numbers, and where those intersect, that is the location of that point. So very similar to that. Now, for each cell is able to hold a large amount of information. It's almost like a file cabinet full of, where you can just stuff it full of stuff here. So for example, if I type in a bunch of random letters in here, like so, if I click off of it, you'll see these letters up here on the top. But if you look up here, this is like a function button here, but this is where you can do a lot of your editing. So if you ever have to go back and change something, a lot of times you can do it up here. Sometimes you can do it within the cell, but personally I think it's easier to do it up here in this edit box. And if I click anywhere, you won't see any of that information until I click on cell A1, and there is your information. And again, if you ever have to make a correction on here, you click inside of your edit box here and put in whatever your whatever you want that to be corrected to. And then if I go into cell B1, click right here and see how I put in a bunch of numbers going across through here. And when I click off of it, you'll see it'll overflow into the other ones. And if I click anywhere else, you do not see any of those characters up there. And also it looks like the letters that was in cell A1 has been cut off. It isn't until I click on B1 do you actually see all the numbers up here. And if I click in cell A1, you'll see all the letters that I had typed in. So each cell is like a file cabinet or a folder where you can just stuff it full of different types of information. And you have to look within those cells in order to see all that information. So even though it looks like in cell A1 a lot of the stuff has been cut off, it's still there. You just have to click on it in order to see all the information that's been stored into it. Alright, so now I'm going to highlight those two and just hit the delete button and just clear those out. And let me go over just a very simple of how to go about doing a simple calculation. So let's say in cell A, I'm going to put in a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. And then in cell B, I'm just going to put in some other numbers here instead here. So 4, 5, 3, and just put in some random numbers here. So let's say I want to do a calculation. And the way that you do a calculation in practically all spreadsheets is that I want to put my answer in column C. So this is where I'm going to be placing my answers. So the way you start a calculation is you're going to tell the cell that you're going to be equal to something. So you start off with an equal sign. And then let's say I want to do a multiplication. So let me go over some of the basic things we would use here. So just like a normal math type of stuff here, the plus means you're adding. Oops, yeah, I know it doesn't like that. If you're subtracting, you're going to use a minus on the keyboard. If you're dividing, you're going to be using the slash. If you're going to be multiplying, you're going to use Shift 8 with the asterisk, which is the little star. If you want to do a square root, you type in SQRT and then open parentheses, and then you're going to put a value on the inside of it and then close parentheses. And if you want to do a square or a cube, you'll put in some number or some measurement, say a 4, and if I wanted to square it, I use that little caret, that little up arrow, and then say 2. So that's how you, mathematically, how you go about putting in those values here. Now there's other ones here, but this is kind of the gist of it. So let's say I want to take column A and multiply it to column B. So in this situation, I want to take 1 times 4. So, and I want to put the answer in column C. So I'm going to click in C1. I'm going to go equal to, and I want to tell the spreadsheet, look at whatever information is in cell A1. Now I can either type in A1, and one thing you'll notice here is that it turns orange, and this box also turns orange. And I want to tell it to multiply, so I'm going to use the Shift 8, the asterisk symbol, and I want the information over here, so in B1. So I'm going to click on, you can either type in B1 or you can just also just click on it. So in this case, I now clicked on it, turned that into a purple B1, and also highlighted this as B1. So I'm going to say this cell C1, is going to equal to A1 times B1. All right, and I hit enter, and I end up getting my answer 4. Now what's kind of neat is that this thing will automatically update. So for example, let's say, oh, I don't want this to be a 1. I'm going to click up here, and I want to change this to a 2. And if you watch the answer, it'll change it to 8. If I want the 4 to be some other number, let's say a 6, then I'll take 2 times 6, which will give me 12. Okay, now there's another neat thing here. You know, if I want to do that for all this information down through here, that's going to be, it takes up a little bit of time. Now there is a shortcut way of doing this, and before I'm going to show you how to go about doing this, there's something else I probably should have shown to you a little bit earlier, is when you click on a box and anywhere here, one thing you'll see is you'll see this blue box and this little tiny blue square down here in the lower right corner. And if you watch the pointer, it goes from a white arrow to a black cross. Okay, when it goes to that, that is this little blue box down here in the lower right corner is a copy command. So for example, let's say I have a number. I'm just going to put a number 1 in there. And I want to copy that down to a whole bunch of other spaces here. So I click on this cell. Okay. And if I grab hold and change the cursor into a black cross, if I click, hold, and drag it down, it'll fill it up with full of 1s. Now if I want to go across, I can click right here. If I click, hold, and go across, it'll fill it up full of 1s. Okay, so this is a quick way if you have to type in the same thing over and over again. This is kind of a shortcut way of doing that, is by clicking on that little blue box down here in the lower right corner. But wait, it gets better. Okay, so I'm going to delete these or undo it, either way. Let me show you something else this thing is also able to do. Let's say I want to have a whole sequence of numbers here in sequential order, and I don't want to type in 1, 2, 3, 4 out to say 100. So let me just go 1, 2, 3. Okay, and I want to continue this pattern all the way down. So a neat thing about spreadsheets is that it's able to see patterns. So if you have to click in the center of the box here, center of the cell, click, hold, and drag it down. So this way you'll highlight these 3 boxes here. Then if you go down to this square in the lower right corner, click, hold, and drag it down. Watch what happens. Ooh, isn't that neat? Okay, so this is a quick way of continuing a pattern here, and especially if you have a large amount of information and it's in some sort of sequential order, you can use this. I'm going to hit undo, or you can delete it. And it shows if you want point 1, point 2, and point 3. Oops. Let me do that again. Point 1, point 2, and point 3. So if I want to continue that pattern, click, hold, drag it down, and you can see it continues that pattern. I'm going to undo it. I'm going to go back here and go 0, 2, 4. Highlight that. Click on the box in the lower right corner, drag it down, and it'll continue that pattern. And what's also kind of fascinating is I can even do other patterns too. For example, Monday, Tuesday, hopefully I spelled these correctly, Wednesday, and I copy this down, click, hold, drag it down, and it'll continue down the rest of the way. This would be great like if you're trying to set up a calendar or something like that, or you can even do, oops, January. If I spell it correctly. I think this is how you spell it. Click, hold, drag it down. And sure enough, it will continue the pattern. Alright, so this is a good way of continuing this. So going back to this calculation here. Up here, we put in the command of A1 times B1. I want to copy that calculation down. So I can go up here, click on that little blue box here in the lower right corner, click, hold, and drag it down. And those are my answers. 2 times 5 is 10, 3 times 3 is 9, 4 times 8 is 32, 5 times 1 is 5. So you can also use this to do calculations here. And as you can see, if I click on this cell right here, you'll see the 5 showing up in the edit box. If I click right here, you'll see 1 show up in the edit box. But if I click here where the formula is located, you'll see a formula instead. And if you notice, I started out with this formula here, A1 times B1. But when you go down to each one, the formula up here will adjust according to the row that you're in, which is kind of a nice little feature here. So rather than having to type the formula out over and over again, you just have to do it one time and then just copy it down. And it'll automatically adjust the formula to take into account of the new row that you're getting that information in. Now there's some other bells and whistles here. I'm not going to get into a lot of those. So, but that's kind of the gist of this. So what I want you to do is on your lab paper, we're going to be basically typing in this information that you see in here. And so you have your ball type, H sub 0, this is your initial height, and then the H over here is the height, where's your bounce height. And then you're going to have the drop height, centimeters, bounce height, 1 centimeters. And you're just type in all the information that you have here, put that into a cell, or into each one of these cells here. So let me show you what that would look like. What I would advise you to do is pause the video and go ahead and do this. And I kind of like one of those cooking shows, I went ahead and had this set up here. So in cell A1, I had the ball type, A2, the H0. There might be a way to do subscripts and superscripts, but I'm not worried about it. So just put down H0. And then cell A3, you have your drop height. And then one important thing here too is put the units in parentheses with the labels of what you're measuring. So drop height is being measured in centimeter. And then bounce height 1 centimeters, bounce height 2 centimeters, bounce height 3, bounce height 4, bounce height 5, all in centimeters here. And then next column, your average bounce height, your highest bounce height, and your lowest bounce height. Okay, so pause the video and go ahead and type in the information like you see here, and then we'll continue on. right, now hopefully you got all your information in here, and I believe you already have the information from the lab here, so you probably already have most of this already filled out. So just like one of those cooking shows, nope, that's not what I want. All right, what I'd like for you to do, I'm going to copy this information over here. And I just made up some information here, so don't use what I'm using here. And the next thing I'd like for you to do is go ahead and put in your information. It's like your drop heights, what was each one of your bounce heights. Do bounce heights 1 through 5, but leave these blank right here. Your average bounce height, highest, and your lowest bounce height. You can do it by hand, but why do it by hand when you can do it by spreadsheet? And plus also it's a good skill to learn here. So go ahead, and if you need to, pause the video and put in your information. Do not use the information I gave to you here. So whatever you recorded, and if you don't have it, let me know, and we'll get that information to you. All right, now chances are when you have this information, the information is going to look something like this. And one thing with spreadsheets, it will often put it so that your labels are on the left side and your numbers are on the right side. And this is to help differentiate between the two. And personally, I don't care for that, especially if you're printing this stuff out and putting it into a report. It's kind of hard to see where your text is on the left and your numbers are on the right side. And so one thing I would advise you to do is just click and highlight all of this. And then if you come over here and this is horizontal alignment, click on that, either go make it everything in left or center. Personally, I kind of prefer centered. And it'll just center all that information here. And including when we do this stuff here, it'll automatically center it since we have that already highlighted. Now, the other thing too, when you're typing in the information, you probably saw the information. Let me change this real quick. I think it's this way. No, okay. Here it is. Okay, you probably saw the information when you first typed it in. Probably looked something like this. Now, there's a couple things you can do here. Is if you bring your cursor, say, in between the letters, like between A and B, and you'll see it turn into a double-sided arrow. If you click, hold, and drag it off to the side, you can make that cell wider. Same thing with the columns. If I turn it into a double arrow, click, hold, and drag it down, you can also make that bigger. Now I'm going to undo this a couple times. Now there's another way of doing this. Let's say I want to make everything in row 3 so it's not overflowing into the next cell. So if I click on number 3, it'll highlight everything for number 3 all the way up to the edge of the spreadsheet. And if you go into Format and scroll down where it says Text Wrapping, and right now it's set for overflow. Probably what you need to do is wrap the text. And what it will do is that when it hits the edge, it'll automatically bring it down. And it'll adjust the height of the cell so you get all the information in there. That way you don't have to go through here and mess around with the widths and the heights of the rows and columns. Alright, so now hopefully as soon as you get all your information in here, we're going to start doing some calculations. So kind of similar to what we did before, but there's also a few other calculations this thing is able to do. So let's say I want, in this column right here, in this cell, I want the average of only the bounce height. So I only want the average of these numbers here. You do not want to include your drop heights. So I want the average bounce heights and I want the bounces 1 through 5. So the way you do this is click right here, and then you're going to type in the equal sign. You'll see this equal to, and now it's ready for a command. And what I want you to do is type in the word average. And then open parentheses. And then it's basically it's going to take an average of whatever you put inside the parentheses. Well, I wanted to look at the information from B1, from B4 to F4. So I'm going to click, hold, and drag all of that. And you'll see B4 colon F4. That means from B4 through F4. And then if I close parentheses, it'll now give me the average of those values. And if later on you find out, oh wait, I made a mistake here. This should be a 151. And you'll see that it'll automatically adjust your calculation here. Now you could possibly do is like take this number plus this number plus this one plus this one plus this one, then divide by 5, or you just type in the word average and highlight what you want to take an average of. For the highest bounce heights, there's another similar thing you can do. I want to look for the largest value just within the bounce heights. So I'm going to go to equal to and type in the word max, M-A-X. Then open parentheses and highlight those numbers. And then close parentheses. And what it does is that it's going to look through all those numbers and find the highest one and record that over here. Now similar to this, for the lowest bounce height, I'm going to go to equal to min, M-I-N, open parentheses, and I wanted to look for the smallest number for the bounce heights 1 through 5. So highlight bounce height 1 through 5, close parentheses, and what it's going to do is look through all of here and find the smallest one here. So let's say, for example, 147, let's say this 147 here was not the correct number here. If I change it to 150, you see the average changes here, and also it now found the new lowest bounce heights. Now, rather than doing that for each one of those, you can do that copy command. So I can highlight these 3 cells, and in order to highlight it, you want to click in the middle, click, hold, and drag to the side. Then go down here to the lower right corner, click, hold, and drag it down. And there's all your calculations. So here's all your averages. Here are all the max, and here are all the minimum measurements. Isn't that cool? I know, that's really cool, Mr. Souter. All right, so now we're ready to start graphing. And this is one area where I'm not too fond of with Google Sheets. Personally, I think Excel does a little bit better job at this. It's a little bit more intuitive with Excel or Quattro Pro or some of these other ones here. But Google Sheets is what we have, and it does an okay job. So first thing I want you to do is just click in a blank spot. Don't click on anywhere where you have a label or anything else here. Before I move on, let me show you something else here too. When you're putting in numbers, make sure you do not put the units in here. And if you try to put a unit in here, the spreadsheet does not understand units. So for example, let's say this bounce height is 151, but I'm going to type in 151 centimeters. Okay, now watch what's going to happen with this. When I hit enter, oh, okay, that's not a great choice here because it was already 151, it was average. Let me do that again. Let's go to this one right here, 156. And I'm going to change this one to centimeters, 156 centimeters. So I went up here in the edit box, 156. Now, watch what happens here, because this was also my largest value, and also it should also have an effect on my average. And what happened is that now it does not understand this. The spreadsheets do not understand units. And that's part of the reason why in the label you put the units up here. It only understands numbers and just bare numbers by themselves. So you cannot put units inside of a spreadsheet. All right, now let's move back to graphing. So you need to click somewhere in a blank area. It doesn't matter where, just make sure it's in a blank area. And then you're going to insert a chart. A chart is a graph. Now, if it starts putting this and it's covering up your information, just click, hold, drag this down out of the way. This way you're able to see your data. Then, I'm going to have to maybe size this up just a little bit and move my camera a little bit. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. So one thing you should see when you open this up is also to the right hand side, there is a chart editor. And if you ever get to the point where you have this and this thing disappears over here, your chart editor, if you need to bring it back, just double click on where your no data graph is going to be placed here, and it'll bring this back. So first thing, go to setup, and where it says column chart, click on that. You do not want a line graph. You want to scroll down and you want to look for a scatter plot. Make sure the one with the small dots, not the one with the big bubbles. Okay, scatter plot, and click on that. Now this is, I don't quite understand why they do this, but this is how it's done here. Your data range, and wants to know where is all of the data located. So what I want you to do is go over here, and where it looks like a little window off to the side, click on that, and it's asking where is the data. So if this is in your way, take this, drag it out of your way, and right now it's saying, well, is it a B13? That's because that's where our cursor was at originally. We want to say this is all of your data. So I'm going to click, hold, and drag this across. Okay. And it'll say from everything from A4 to I9 is where your data is located. Typically, do not include your labels. If you do, it's not a big deal, but I would recommend just getting the numbers. Then click OK. Now it's asking where is your x-axis. Well, what we want is we want the drop height here, and we want the bounce height up along the y-axis. Okay, so now this is correct, but just in case it's not, what I want you to do is click over here. I'm going to remove it here for a moment, and let's pretend we're starting from scratch, or if it's incorrect. So you can remove it, and so if I add x-axis, and it's asking, well, where is your x-axis going to be located? Your x-axis is going to be your drop height, this information here. So you can see A4 through A9. And the numbers here just represents, well, these are numerical information here. So I wanted to look at this information right here. So I'm going to click on that. And so now it's understanding this is going to be my x-axis. My y-axis is your series. And as you can see, there's a whole lot. I only want the average bounce height to be my my y-axis. Now, all right, I'm going to continue this on a little bit later on, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye. Sorry for the interruption. Let me continue on. Now, I've backed up just a little bit. I got rid of the graph, and so I'm just going to pick up, backtrack a little bit, and continue on as though we're just starting with the graphs now. So, first thing you want to do is make sure that you click off of one of the empty cells here. Make sure you don't click on any of the numbers or any of the labels, so just click on an empty spot. And we're going to be inserting a graph into this spreadsheet. So go to Insert, and the graph is called a chart. So click on Chart. And one thing that you'll see is, let me back up just a little bit, is that you should have this information here. Let's see if I can try to zoom in a little bit. Okay, so you'll see this box here, and if it's in your way, just click, hold, and drag it down so it's out of your data. And then also you should see this information over here on the right side, your chart editor. So this is how you go about setting up the information in your graph. Now, if you ever click and this thing disappears, and so for example, if I click off of it somewhere, sometimes it disappears. If that happens, what you need to do is double click on this, and then it should bring this back. Now, first thing we need to do is tell it what type of graph is this going to be. So you make sure that you're underneath Setup, then go to your column chart, and then scroll down, and you do not want a line graph. Instead, what you want is a scatter plot. Scatter plots and line graphs are similar, but they're not the same. And so technically, what most people think is a line graph is technically a scatter plot graph. So make sure you click on the one with the small circles, not with the big bubbles. So click on this. So now you're just telling it what type of graph this is going to be. Next thing is you want to tell where is the data range. And this is something which is a little bit different that you don't really have to do on Excel. And so there's like a little window over here in the side where in my case here it says F13. That's because that's where I clicked at originally. So I'm going to click on this little window icon, and it's going to bring this up. Move this out of the way if you need to, and highlight just the numbers. So I'm going from column A, and for me it's going to be A4. Click, hold, and drag to, in my case here, it's going to be I9. So I'm just telling the spreadsheet where is all of the information located. You could possibly also highlight the labels, but I would recommend not doing that. So as you can see here, it's everything from A4 to I9 is where all the data is located. And let's go ahead and click on OK. And it will try to generate a graph based upon the information you provided. And sometimes it's right, sometimes it's not. This is not completely correct. Now, in case if it did not give you the correct x-axis, what you need to do is go over here underneath the x-axis. You're going to click on the three little dots and just remove whatever might be inside of there. So you're starting with a clean slate. Then you're going to add an x-axis. And for my x-axis, for this axis down here, I want this to be my drop height. So if you look over here, my drop height is in column A, A4 through A9. So if you look over here, it's A4 through A9. So I'm going to click on that. And that's now saying, okay, A4 through A9 is going to be your x-axis. Your series is your y-axis. It's going to be the information over here. I want this to be the average bounce height, not the individual bounce heights, just the average. So what I want to do is, what I would recommend doing is initially is just remove all of this. So click on the three dots, remove, click, remove, click, remove. And all you're doing is just removing all those points. Right now it's trying to graph everything. And remove. Okay, so once you get to where it says add series, I want to use the information that's in my average bounce height right here in this column, which is, for me, is column G. So I'm going to go over here, and where it says series, add series, click on that, and it's going to be the information in the G. So I'm going to click on that, and look at that. Now I just made up these numbers here, so don't base it upon my information up here. So this was just, these are completely fictitious values. Leave these checkboxes alone. Hopefully it will show up this way. And honestly, I have a hard time understanding how this stuff over here works. I think it's a little bit confusing. What I found works is have these first two unchecked and have this bottom one checked. And if you have any issues with it, sometimes it's best just kind of start all over with the graphing part of it and just kind of go through this whole sequence again. So once we have all that, this is kind of the basic of just getting the graph in general set up. So now we're going to start adding all the other features to the graph. So we need to add a title. We need to start adding labels to the X and Y axis. And we also want to put in a trend line and a formula for that trend line. And all that is underneath the customize. So, and again, if you ever click off of this and you lose it, go into a blank area. It's a little bit closer to the edge. Sometimes if you try to click it like on one of the lines or one of the points, it doesn't work here. If you lose the information over here, just go over to a blank area, double click. Yep, do it again. Double click, and it should bring this back. And you want to click on customize, and make sure you scroll up to the top. Sometimes it might be some of the top features here may be hidden up here on the top here. So make sure you're all the way up to the top. And chart style, that is how you go about selecting it. If it's a line graph, bar graph, scatter plot, those type of things here. So we're going to skip over this. Go to this next one underneath here, where it says chart and axis titles. So click on that. And the way it's kind of displayed is a little bit weird. Personally, I think it's kind of weird. So you go into chart and axis title, and it says chart title, and then title text here. So underneath here for title text, you're going to type in something like ball drop lab. Okay, and as you type it in, you should see that appear over here on your graph. Now, it's kind of a weird location here as to how you go about putting your X and Y labels on here, because it's located right here. So once you have this set up the way you want it, go back up to the chart title, the little drop down menu. You can add like a subtitle underneath your chart title. Don't worry about that. So the next one is your horizontal axis title. So go and click on that, and you'll see this screen will appear blank. But we're now going to be adding the horizontal axis title. So you go down here, click on this, and your horizontal axis title is going to be drop height. And then, make sure I spelled it correctly. Nope. And then, in parentheses, open parentheses, centimeters, and then close parentheses. Okay, you want to put what unit is it being measured in. And as you do that, you should see that also appear down here at the same time. So drop height in centimeters. Now we're going to go ahead and average, or put in our average bounce height along the y-axis. So go back over here and click on your drop down menu, and this is your vertical axis title. And so for this one, it's going to be your average bounce height. And it's going to be inside a set of parentheses, centimeters, close parentheses. And as you do that, you should see that also appear right along your y-axis. And you can add, change the colors and fonts and those type of things here. Don't worry about that. Scroll down a little bit, and where you see series, so click on that. And you want to scroll down a little bit, and the part where it says trend line, when you click on that, you're going to see another menu appear here. So put a little check mark inside of trend line, and as soon as you do that, you'll see it creates a line on here, and it will ask you what type of trend line do you want. Do you want linear? Do you want exponential? Do you want let's say logarithmic, something like that? So you have these different choices here, and if you look, hopefully you recognize that the data pretty well fits a linear line. So go ahead and click on linear. Then so this is also what's called your best fit line. So now we're going to find out what is the formula for that line. So if you go over underneath here, drop down a little bit, you'll see label, and right now it says none. So click on the drop down and put down use equation. And this is, I don't know if you can see it too well here, it says 0.778 times x plus 4.19. That is your slope formula for that trend line. So basically it's y is equal to mx plus b is what it's showing. So this is your slope formula, and this is what you will need to write in your lab paper. Where is it at? So on your lab paper, right here is where you're going to be putting in your slope formula. So you put down y is equal to whatever your mx plus b is. Like in my case, I'll put down like y is equal to 0.778 plus 4.19. Okay. Underneath here is what you're going to do is you're going to basically rewrite this form up here for part A, but you're going to rewrite it but substitute x and y for the labels that you have for your x and y on your axis. So when it says y, instead of saying y, instead you're going to say average bounce height is equal to m. So you're going to have your 0.778 times x. So instead of saying x, you're going to put down drop height plus, and then for the b, you're going to put down plus 4.19. So all you're doing is just rewriting what you wrote for part A and substituting x and y with your labels for your x and y axis. So that's the purpose of this line right here. All right, now let me show you something else. You don't have to do this, but this is kind of a nice thing to see here. Is underneath here, you'll see it says show r squared. And if you put a check mark inside of this box, you'll see right beside the slope, you'll see this r point, and in my case here it's showing 0.982. Basically what that means is that how close is the data, how close is it to this line? If you have an r square of 1, that means these data points are sitting exactly on that line. Typically, whenever you're taking a measurement, that's very, very difficult to do. It's not impossible, but it's really difficult to do. Basically, as long as your r square is close to 1, that means you got a really good data set. And the further you get away from 1 here, then that means you're going to have some data points that are going to be further away from this trend line. So you could have, if I have like a really low number here, that means I'm having data points and a large distance away from that trend line. So this is just kind of showing that you have a good set of data if this is pretty close to being 1. But for right now, just leave that off. So go back over here where it says show r squared and uncheck that. Now, something else that might be helpful for you if you need to is if you go down a little bit further where it says horizontal axis and vertical axis. Let's say, for example, you may have had where some of the data may have been partially cut off. And I want to expand this out just a little bit further. So I can go down to my horizontal axis, click on that. And if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see minimum and maximum. I'll try to do this automatically, but I can set the minimum. I can force it to become any value I want to. In other words, if I were to make this, say, 50, or let's go 100. If I were to make this 100, you can see I just cut off my 0 to 100. So I'm just looking from 100 to about 200. So I'm going to set this back to 0. And maybe I just want just a little bit extra space over here. And so I can maybe put in like 220. And you'll see here it will move this out just a little bit more. And don't put a check at log scale, just leave that alone. And then the same thing is also for your vertical axis. You know, I might be able to raise this up just a little bit higher. And so if I go scroll down a little bit, I can set this to 0 and maybe like 190. And you can see it raised my graph up just a little bit. It has no effect on your slope. It just kind of readjust how you are using the space on your graph. So what I would recommend doing here is just setting it up so that you're using as much space as possible when you're doing that. All right, so that is basically the graphing section. When you're done, what I want you to do is up here on the top, I want you to type in your last name, your first name, and then like hyphen, ball drop lab, and then the period. So in your case here, it would be like 9th period, so hyphen 9. And that way I can identify who it's from, what lab is it, and what period are you in. And then go over here and share it with me. Okay. Now, so we're basically done with the graph. Once we have that information, one thing we can do with this is that, typically in science, this is one thing which is a little bit different in like math class, is that typically in math you use the data and you create a graph, and that's about it. In science, this is just a stepping stone. And this is a very powerful tool that's used in many areas of science. And so you often have to use a set of known information, like in this situation right here, find out what is the pattern that's taken place from that, and then using that formula from that pattern to be able to find an unknown. And so part of the lab, and you don't have to worry about this until you get back, is making a prediction. And so what you're going to be doing is that you're going to be taking the form that you had on the previous page. Sorry, you have to flip back and forth quite a bit. You're going to be taking this formula down here, and then also looking at the information where you dropped the ball from. And so what you're going to be doing for this part is you're going to be making a prediction here. And you're going to pick 3 values, one high, one medium, one low, of a height that you did not drop your ball originally. So for example, if you dropped one ball on the previous page at 200 and another ball at, say, 170, well, because you did not pick like 180, you'll put like 180 or 185 or whatever amount you want right here. And then you do the same thing for the other ones. So you pick a high value, a medium value, and a low value. The only thing I ask for you to do is pick 3 different locations that falls within the range that you have here. So if your highest was 200 and your lowest one was 20, pick 3 values that are between 200 and 20. So between 200 and your 21, but of 5 locations where you did not drop it. Then, using that formula you had on the previous page, you're going to take your height dropped, plug it into the equation, and then what you're going to do is make a prediction as to how high will the ball bounce up to. So in other words, it's saying, okay, I did not drop it at 180. If I drop it at 180, according to this slope formula here, how high does the formula tell me that it should bounce up to? And you're going to do that for each one of those. Then you're going to test it. So when you come back, what you're going to do is drop it from this height and see where does it bounce up to, and you record that value over here, and we're going to see, compare this value to this value. And one thing you might be surprised is just how close those 2 values are. Then down here for number 4 is you're going to do something a little bit different. And let me bend the camera down a little bit. Well, I'm going to take a little ride here. Don't get sick on me. Okay. Hopefully the iPad doesn't fall over. Okay. Let me tighten this down. All right, so let me do the one over here. So what you're going to have previously on the other page here, where you have your, make sure I'm within frame here. So you have a y is equal to mx plus b. And so for my situation here, I'm going to have y, make sure I can within frame here, y is equal to 0.778x plus 4.19. Okay, and that is what I had on my, hold on, I'm going to take another little ride here. And that's what I have right here. Okay, so, and there we go. And then what I'm going to do is just substitute here. So my y is my average bounce height is equal to 0.778. My x is my drop height plus 4.19. Okay, so all I did was just substitute y and x for the labels that are on the graph. All right, now over here on this page, when you're making the predictions, is that over here, what we're doing, if you remember, y is equal to mx plus b. This time we're rearranging this and we're technically solving for x. So in order to solve for x, we have to subtract b first and then we have to divide by m. And so when you rearrange it, you end up with x is equal to y minus b. What I would recommend doing is closing this up in parentheses, divided by m. All right, so if you remember, x was the drop height. Is equal to my y is the average bounce height minus, if you remember, it was my slope formula was positive 4.19, so it becomes negative 4.19. Now, if yours came out to be negative, then it's going to have to become positive. And then all over my slope, which is 0.778. Okay, can you see all that? So what we're going to do with that information is work backwards. Is that from that graph, you're going to pick 3 locations where the ball bounced to. So in other words, you're going to be taking the information that's here. Okay, you're going to look at the numbers here. Let's say, I'm just making these numbers up here. Let's say you have 120, say 100, a 70, a 30, and a 10. Okay, so this is where they bounced up to. So you dropped them off at higher locations here, and this is where they bounced to. And so what you want to do, again, is to pick a high, a medium, and a low that's somewhere between 120, in my situation, 120 and 10, but within this range, and it's something that was not measured with your data. So let's say I may pick like a 115, a 50, and maybe a 25. Oops, so you can see that here. So maybe I'll pick those 3 right here. So I'm going to say 115, 50, and 25. So I'm going to put that underneath here. 115, a 50, and a 25. And what you're going to do is take these numbers and plug that into here. And when you plug them in, what you're going to do is you're going to find out where should the ball be released in order to bounce to this height. In other words, you're going to end up with a larger number over here. So in order to bounce it to 115, maybe I had to release it at, let's say, 195 or something like that. Now, one common mistake a lot of students make with this is that when they do this, when they plug it into a calculator, they go 115 minus 4.19 divided by 0.778. If you do that, you're going to get an incorrect answer, because technically it's seeing it as, I'm using DH for your drop height, is equal to, if you plug it in the way I mentioned here, it'd be 115 minus 4.19 divided by 0.778. And that's how it would do it. What you're going to have to do, that's the reason why I tell you use parentheses here, is first plug in the 115 minus 4.19, hit the equal sign, get your answer, then divide it by 0.778. Or if you're comfortable using parentheses, open parentheses, 115 minus 4.19, close parentheses, divided by 0.778. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. If not, let me know. And so what the students had done today was this, is that yesterday they made their predictions. Today they tested it and see how close were their results. And so like for the first one, they would drop it from this height and record where did it bounce to. And then basically it was just a comparison between those two. For this section, it's a little bit different, is I wanted them to have the ball to bounce to this height. So let's say I calculated and say it came out to be 190. So they would release it at 190. And if it didn't reach 115, then they would have to change this number slightly. So in other words, let's say it came a little bit short of that, So they may have found out, okay, I have to release this at 191. And in order for it to bounce to 115. So what they were doing is recording where did they actually have to release the ball in order for it to bounce to this height. So when you get back, this is what you're going to be doing. And it doesn't take very long here. And then there's some questions that are on the last page as well. If you have any questions or concerns, let me know, and we'll get you through this. All right? You have a good day, and you take care. Bye-bye.